Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, Kim Seltzer, a dating and makeover expert, where I will help you build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. Hey, before we get to the show, I just wanted to tell you about a new workshop coming up soon that relates to what you are about to hear today, and that is modern dating. If you are burnt out doing online dating and you want to learn how to meet people in real life in this modern world, especially if you are a later dater dating in the second act, I have just the workshop for you coming up February 26th. It's called How to Meet People in Real Life IRL. I have a lot of requests lately that you are wanting to meet people organically, but you're not sure how or where to go or even how to be. And you also are saying you have a lot of anxiety around it. So this is a co-ed interactive workshop to give you the best tips for confidently navigating the social scene without anxiety and without uncertainty. Because look, it's more than just about dating. It's about changing the way you mingle, present yourself, and connect daily so that you can date with confidence. Just click the link you see in the show notes to register or go to stophatingdating.com. That's stophatingdating.com. But hurry because seats are limited. I would love to see you live there, especially if you are a podcast listener and I haven't seen you before. All right, now back to the show. Navigating the modern dating world is not easy, and it's like being on a ride with no ending in sight with a lot of pitfalls, ups and downs. And as a therapist, I've noticed that there is an increasing amount of dating fatigue, a lot of disappointment happening out there, anxiety, rejection, and it has even the most confident people feeling insecure and overwhelmed, which affects your emotional well-being. And if you struggle with self-worth on top of it all, or self-esteem issues, these effects can particularly be harmful because you might rely on each click, right? Each like as a dopamine hit to validate you and your confidence. Now, and on top of the fact that if you are dating over 40, you might not even be aware of the skills needed for modern dating, like DMing each other or flirt texting. These are skills that I teach all the time, and how to date without attachment. There's a concept, right? And getting away from the shiny object syndrome. So with all these dynamics, there are traps you might fall into with modern dating, like swipe fatigue, ghosting, misinterpreting texts, option overload. You might even move too quickly and ignore the red flags due to the fast pace and strong desire to just be done with dating so that you can just get into the relationship. Obviously I deal with this a lot. And there was a client that I was working with, and she had been married for a very long time. And she got out there in the modern dating world. And, on top of it all, she was an introvert. And she just was overwhelmed. And by the time that she called me up, she was just numbing out on the apps, not really giving anybody a chance, vetting these guys so hard, thinking who could be my next husband. And she really never had any dating experiences. So she fell into the trap of, like, first of all, the shiny object syndrome. She was only going for like guys she thought was hot, and obviously these were not good guys for her, and she had a series of narcissists that she attracted in her life. And so she really had to learn how to slow down and understand, first of all, modern dating, on top of it, just how to date without attachment, as I call it, so that she could really get to know herself and how she can be different this time around so that she could attract something different this time around. And so I just had her dating. I taught her how to flirt online. I got her new outfit. She definitely was not dressing the part. We had to do a whole makeover. And she was this beautiful woman. And she did a couple of my dating retreats, and we did some one-on-ones as well. And it was so beautiful to watch because she went from this, person who hated dating to actually really embracing it and liking it. And it wasn't until she liked it. I always tell people this. It wasn't until she was like, this is fun, when all of a sudden she met this really great guy. And they started, dating and taking it slower and really like, I was teaching her some of the signs to look for. And her, she really was in more that receiving mode. And lo and behold, they're still together today. And gosh, I just texted her, it was like a couple days ago, and she's like, yeah, we're still together. And this is one of the best relationships that I've been in. So, yeah, I mean, being aware of the traps when you're, trying to get out there, it really doesn't matter what age you're at, we all fall into pitfalls. And it can help you navigate modern dating more intentionally with greater success when you pay attention to some of these pitfalls. And with me today, I have the perfect people to help me talk about the latest modern dating pitfalls and how to not fall for them. Okay, so they are active daters turned dating insiders and top influential voices of modern dating, relationships, and connection in the digital world. They're the authors of How to Be Dateable. I cannot wait for this book. And the co hosts of the hit podcast Dateable, which has been named one of the top podcasts about modern dating and relationships by the New York Times, Huffington Post, Oprah Daily, and more. They're also the hosts and executive producers of the dating experiment show Exit Interview. And Julie brings her background in human centered design and I love this qualitative research. While I was going to say your name wrong again. Yue, we were just having this conversation offline, shares her experience as a dating coach. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to have you back. This is the second time you've been on the show, too.
I know. We're best friends now.
I know, except that I can't say your name yet. No, now I have it. Yue, Julie. Anyway, well, first of all, I'm so excited for you about your book. Congrats.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
really
you.
exciting. And I love just the whole you know, I, having research, in all of this is super important because like what I was saying before, there's so many pitfalls, so many trends that are happening right now, and understanding what's out there is really important because I think people take it personally when things happen. And by you putting out this information, I think it just makes a little normalizes it a little bit, knowing that, hey, like we're all in this together. What can we do to get around it? So, anyway, for those people who don't know you, I would love to actually start there. If you want to tell just a little bit of backstory with each of you and how you came to this.
Well, we've had our podcast for almost a decade. So we've been doing, I guess, dating research for a long time. And at the time Julie and I met, we met through a mutual friend. We were both actively dating, but also actively trying to figure out dating like everybody else. And we thought it would be a good idea to share some stories with ourselves from our friends of what people were going through, just like you said, Kimmy, to make people feel like they're not alone in what they're going through. But now, fast forward to almost, I think it's been over 9 years now later, and over 500 episodes later, we've just found that dating can be better. And dating is
Mhm.
supposed to be enjoyable, and dating is supposed to be fun. But just like the client you were talking about, there was this numbing effect that people feel overwhelmed and defeated and depleted from dating. So we really took that into our own hands and said, there's better ways to date, and we can get out of this dating hellhole that so many people feel like it is. It's harder than ever, and so that's our impetus for writing the book.
That's beautiful. Julie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever set out to be a dating expert. In fact, if you looked at me like 20 years ago, you'd be like, what? Because I was equally as confused. I read all the books, I did all the things, and I could not make love work. I couldn't. I feel like I was like one of those people that were like, why can't I just move past that third date? Like, what's wrong with me? Back to what you were saying before, we take it so personally. This was quintessential me. I took everything very personally. And I think this podcast, like being able to do it, part of the aha for me was like, everyone is dealing with this. This is hard for everyone. And when you think about it, I mean, love is a very tender subject at the core of it. Like you're asking for someone to choose you and to love you and want to be with you. And of course, it's like the one area that if we keep working at, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be results. Like, of course, there's ways to work at it to like, better your relational skills. But I mean, like, just go on date after date and not change anything beyond that. Like in work, for instance, the more effort you put in, you usually see that outcome. And that
Mm.
can really be fatiguing for people.
Yeah, no, it is so true. And sometimes when people are almost like hyper focused on it too,
Mhm.
like that backfires as
Yes.
well. So, and especially if they're doing it wrong, or they're finding that there are like kind of these pitfalls, and if they're experiencing those negative things over and over again, then that's when people burn out and give up.
Oh,
Mhm.
totally.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
remember like one of my friends when I was in the thick of the serial dating just being like, I think you're doing too much. And like in the
Yeah.
moment, I was like, this is so infuriating. Please don't say that. But now looking back, I'm like, I think she was right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I want to kind of start there because each of you went through your own journey dating, and obviously, like things have shifted in the world too in
Yes.
the last 10 years. But I was curious as you were going through your own experiences, what were some of the hardships and the kind of pitfalls, if you will, that you stumbled upon?
I always thought I was the best dater in the world. Like if there was a trophy for pro dater of the year, like I thought I would win that trophy every year because I was very performative. I knew how to entertain people on dates. I knew how
Uh,
to make good conversation, but I realized I wasn't going deep. And this is really
um,
from my experience as a dating coach in New York. I thought that job was so easy. Like I fell into being a dating coach for men because I was like, "Oh, you just basically trick people into liking you and then you go on dates with them. Like how hard is that?" So when I was exploring deeper relationships and connections, I realized there was a block because I didn't
mm,
know how to have these connections. And I always thought that once you're in a relationship, that's where you deepen your connection. And that's not really the case. I think the need for connection starts at date number 1. Like
Yep.
you still connect with the people even if it's not on a romantic level. So my evolution of like attitude towards dating over the years, it's not about having a relationship save you or to go deeper with someone. Is taking every opportunity to explore the deepest connection you can have with the person in your life. That could be a partner, that could be someone you're on a date with, that could be just a friend in front of you. And that's the ultimate joy of dating is exploring these deeper connections.
I love that you said that, by the way, because I find that 90% of my clients struggle with this, and
Yes.
they'll be guarded and wait until, they,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
it's almost backwards because when you create an emotional connection with someone, that creates attraction even
Right.
more.
Yes.
And you get to see the authentic person, as they are, as because we all are humans. That's what connects us. And I actually think that the physical attraction goes up when you're more emotionally connected as well.
Oh,
100%. 100%.
absolutely.
Right. And so I know I love that you like kind of called yourself out on that and realized that on your journey. How about you, Julie? What did you find?
Yeah. I mean, I think just like one of the things we've realized from doing this podcast and like impotence for this book too,
Yeah.
it's like you actually don't need to be good at dating, at least the way it is currently. In fact, it's like actually more disconnecting because, there's so many games and so many like what you were just describing when we were talking about. It's like this me versus you mentality. Like we don't see
Ah,
each other as like a
Mhm.
unit in dating, even though that's ultimately what we're trying to get towards. And I think I was different in the sense that I was the queen of situationships, like before they even had the title of situationship. And
you
I think
probably coined the term.
I coined it without coining it. They were like, that girl has had a lot of them. And I think at the root of it was that like I didn't believe that like first of all, actually I think there's multiple. I don't think I even really knew what a healthy relationship looked like
Mm.
was
Ah,
first of all. And then second, I think I didn't believe that like I was worthy of it or like I wanted it so badly that I would stay in these like unfulfilling situations just so like I would have that person to talk about with my friends too, even though like they would never, be with me at any events or doing what relationships did. And like for me, it was, I was in this 5-year on again, off again relationship that like was the first like real love for me. And it was great in many ways, but obviously any on again, off again by nature isn't going to be healthy.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it really took me like, through this podcast, really changing the way that I view dating and showing up to enter the dating world a completely different way this last time around with my needs at the forefront instead of, bending over backwards, trying
Mm.
to be liked by everyone and, taking things so personally. And that's what led me to my current partner of over 3 years. That's by far the healthiest relationship I've ever
Oh, it's
been in.
been 3 years. Oh,
Yeah,
congrats.
yep.
Oh my gosh, Julie, that's awesome. I know because I've known you for a while, so that's great. That's good to hear. And what you're speaking about also, I think, thank you for like just sharing that because I do think there's so much fear and mistrust out there. And it sounds like before, having situationships and casual encounters or push me pull me type of kind relationship keeps you safe if you think about it
Yes,
because
Mhm.
subconsciously
definitely.
right, like it's not going to really go anywhere.
Yes.
Totally.
So that I think that's another, I guess, trend that I'm seeing too. There's so much fear and mistrust that people almost self-sabotage these things.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, it was like if I could always point to them being the problem, I never had to look at myself
Yes.
and take accountability. And that was a big
Bingo.
thing. But yeah, I think that is it. Like Yue and I now have like, I mean, we've talked to thousands of daters. We've worked with some subsets of that, like, all the people in our community.
Mm.
And we've really like also seen what sets apart people, like what makes them approach dating in a healthier way that feels better for their mental health, that ultimately leads them to good partnerships. And there's just such a shift that needs to happen in dynamics of, getting out of these patterns and getting out of our own way. And that's what we really saw is like, we believe everyone is dateable. It's just modern dating norms that are getting in our
Mhm.
way and our own actions.
Such a good message. I love that you're sending that. Well, and I did wanna, like because I know you have these 4 modern dating traps, that
Yes.
you highlight, and I would love to go through those and just maybe talk about those because 'cause I'm sure I've had clients and friends that have fallen into those traps, and I think it'd be really helpful for the listeners.
Well, these are all traps that we're not conscious of. So I think it's
Yeah,
important to note that we all fall for these traps. It's not like
right.
you're
Yeah.
weak if you fall for these. And we're not at fault here. We're kind of a product of society and modern dating culture. So one of the traps at the forefront is this expectation of love on demand, basically your Amazon mentality for dating. Like you think that if you go out there and swipe on apps and you're looking for someone, they come to your doorstep within 2 days. And if it doesn't happen right away, or you don't feel a spark right away, you think there's no long-term potential. And the danger of this trap is that we don't, again, going back to connection, connection takes time
Mhm.
to build. Love is created. It's not something that just shows up on your doorstep. So we don't give each other enough time to let the connection build. This is what I was doing during those dating coach days because it was easy. It was easy to get the spark. Like, honestly, having butterflies in your stomach is way easier than falling in love with someone. So we are coveting the wrong thing here. We're
Mhm.
like coveting that immediate, like, oh, I want to be with you, right? Or when or this is the one, I can just tell this is different. Well, that's a relationship that can be built over time, but not necessarily felt right away. So we shouldn't fault a connection because there's a lack of immediate connection.
And
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, go ahead, Julie.
no, you go first. Sorry
Are
about
you
that.
gonna comment on that? Because I
I,
have something to add
yeah,
too.
you go first. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I was just gonna say, like, I think we're in a state of that instant gratification
Hmm.
culture, and we're doing this with
Absolutely.
everything. So the fact that it's spilling into dating and relationships is not, I guess, surprising. But
Yeah.
with that, it taps into the same part of the brain they found as like the jackpot. So like people are
Hmm.
just swiping or
Yep.
putting in the coin waiting for like the jackpot, yet it never really comes. So nobody can really fulfill that like abundance that they're looking for because they're not paying attention. So I love that's a category. So Julie, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like agree 100% that it spills into everything in life. And that's
Yeah.
why, again, it's not like anyone's fault. It's like only natural that this would, cause you to also do the same action. In our book, we actually have a quiz and we
Oh,
have
cool.
people be able to identify like what type of dating archetype they are, like what type of dater they are. And in our, decade of speaking to thousands of daters, like we realized that people kind of fell into different types, like different, strengths that they had, but also these things that are getting in their way. And with all of these traps, like Yue was just mentioning, for her, people could definitely take the quiz and like find out who they are, but like Yue was this quintessential maverick, and that was her role. And then I had the dreamer achiever. Those were my two that I scored on. And the way the expectation of love on demand showed up for me was that I got really ahead of myself, like a dreamer and someone that wanted things to progress to the next stage and was all about the milestones. I was envisioning a future with someone when that spark happened. So, like with the expectation of love on demand, it causes you to maybe not focus on the right partners because the spark isn't immediately there, or get way ahead of yourself on the people that aren't right when you're holding on to like that first moment with them, even though like they never call you consistently after.
Yes, it is. It's like that Netflix show that you're just waiting for the love story to, end, and then
Yes.
the on-demand love story. Yeah. And what did you say? And obviously, you might have research on this, but and this is just based on experience from working with both men and women. Do you find that women tend to be more the dreamers like that than men? Is there
No.
any? No,
I mean, we
really?
don't have hard facts to support this,
Yeah.
but I will say when we initially tested the
Mhm.
quiz, there were quite a few men that scored as dreamers.
Interesting.
I think it's the stereotypes of
Mm.
these gendered roles that we think that men and women fall into certain categories, but this quiz really takes the subconscious to the forefront and basically like bring what you wouldn't say out loud publicly to this quiz assessment type, so that when you do get your results, that's like basically what your subconscious is telling you. And
Yeah.
I would never have said, oh, I'm the maverick, like I'm the stuck on being the independent woman type, but this quiz really highlighted that for me because that is a value of mine. Independence is a
Mhm.
value of mine. I also am very independent in relationships, which makes me a great girlfriend because I can give space and I need my own space. But the downfall, or really the blind spot of what my archetype as a maverick is, I put up all these walls when the hard conversations start. I run away. I will literally run away from conversations. I've done this so many times with previous partners. Like we're talking about something very serious, and I'm like, I don't need this. I'm gonna go exercise my independence, and I would go hop on the subway and go off somewhere, like go to Coney Island and spend the day there. Like
Yeah.
that was my identity. So I think for people to take this quiz, and Kimmy, I'd be very curious what you would score on this one, is to
Oh, me
highlight,
too.
yeah, right? But it would highlight kind of your superpowers as a
Mhm.
wonderful
Yeah.
potential partner to someone, and then just some of the blind spots that you may not normally be aware of.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then as a therapist, I'm also curious because like as you're saying these different archetypes, I can already see some of like even our upbringing and how it shapes
Mhm.
us as daters, and
Oh,
and to your
yeah.
point, like sometimes they're gifts in disguise. And like I work with a ton of people who are just people pleasers and over
Mhm.
caregivers, as I call it. I
Yeah.
mean, I was definitely one of them when I mean, dating as a therapist was not sexy, let me tell you. Like I threw everybody on the couch, right? Like when I first got out there and dated. And so I like one of two things would happen. Either I would attract, the fixer uppers, right? The
Mhm.
Mhm.
narcissists, the takers, or like the ones who would be like actually good partners and in a healthier way, they were like lady, like woo, too
Yeah.
much. There was nothing sexy about it, and there was no sense of earning them. So, that's why I think it's really interesting, like how it shapes us. However, it's not getting rid of being the maverick or
No.
Correct.
being the people
Correct.
pleaser or whatever it is. It's just letting people earn that about you and use it in a way that serves you. So I
Right.
think that's really like interesting about it. Okay, so what's
Bingo.
another trap? So we talked about
Yeah.
on demand. What's the next one?
Yeah, first of all, I would definitely guess that you're a dreamer thinker, but we can come back to
Oh,
that
really?
later.
Oh,
I will have to buy the
interesting.
book and take the test to find out.
I was thinking maybe Energizer, but I don't know.
Oh, I
Now
can
we're
see
now
that
we're gonna
too.
find out.
Anyways,
Can you be
another
all of
trap.
them?
You
Can I
can.
just
I
be
mean,
all
that's
of
the
them?
thing is everyone has a little bit of
Yeah,
everything. It's just
yeah,
what's dominant for you. The
right.
next trap that we think is really fundamental is what we call the settling paradox. And,
Oh,
every I think everyone's biggest fear in dating is settling. And I think there's due reason for that. Like we are also experiencing like the fallout of divorce and marriage not necessarily saving us and being the be all end all, and we want to choose well. And we are not saying that you should not prioritizing choosing well, but I think what ends up happening is we end up settling for the wrong things. And for instance, like we're so afraid to settle for someone that's not like our ideal, because especially in today's world, it feels like choices are abundant. Like you can cherry pick who you want on a dating app like Amazon, back to that. And we think that we can have this list, whether it's a conscious list we have or just living in our heads of like, I need the most aspirational qualities even of myself. Like we've seen people be like, well, I need a fellow runner, even though they haven't run like a half marathon in years. But it's like one of those things that, it feels like I've earned it. So I need someone to my level and I don't want to settle. But what ends up happening is that we settle for situationships or
Yeah.
unfulfilling relationships, and we're not focused on the right qualities, because like in apps for instance, you can only filter by height or someone's location or what their occupation is. We don't know if they're someone that is all in and committed, or a kind trustworthy person. Like we don't get that info, so that's not what makes it to the top of our list.
interesting. So question about that one. Could it go the other way too, where like no one's good enough, like where people are like
Oh
vetting so
yeah.
hard? Is that the same kind of trap are you talking about?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Ah,
Well,
yes.
you could think,
Absolutely.
well, what we see is a lot of people think there's no one good enough. There's
Yeah.
no one good enough on the apps. Like
Correct.
there's nobody out there.
Right.
Yet then you look at who they allow into their lives. It's
Yes.
the situationships. It's the cat and mouse games. It's the waiting for text back. I love giving this example because I think it fully encapsulates the settling paradox. I went on a third date with someone. It was a hiking date. I show up to the date and I totally was like grossed out by the fact that he wore black socks on a hiking
I
date.
could help him with that, but
But
Reach out to him 10 years
easy
ago.
fix. Yeah, yeah.
but here was a man willing to spend some time with me. I mean, we're about to go on a
Yeah.
half day hike, and I was ick, like, ugh, wear black socks. Yet that night, I went home and called up this guy who already expressed he was not interested in having a relationship with me. He was not ready to commit. But me thinking, well, I deserve better than black socks, man. I'm going to go for this man who has expressed he's not into me. But because I get to chase him, somehow he's worth more in my mind. So I think that happens a lot. It's like we think there's nobody good out there because we ruled all of them out. But then you have to like zoom out and say, what am I allowing into my life right now? I should have higher standards.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the
Yes.
biggest mystery to me still is like why we're always talking about the abundance of options, yet everyone thinks there's no one good out
Yeah.
there. And it's like a scarcity factor.
Oh my
And I think,
gosh.
and it's like
Totally.
when you meet that person that you have the chemistry with, that has a lot of the qualities on the list, we gravitate to them and we want to make it work, because it feels like they're like kind of the diamond in the rough, but we ignore a lot of other aspects about them. And a lot of this is our red flag culture that we're in today, the ick culture, having a certain type that we can't get past. all of this like
Yeah.
stems really deep. And, we're not, again, not saying to not look for red flags, but there's a big difference of wearing black socks versus like being verbally abusive, right? Like the real
Right.
red flags, we're not calling red flags.
Okay, this is so good. So again, the therapist in me is like going crazy, like with all of this in such a good way, the way that you're like just saying it in a simple format of how like all of this stuff manifests. And
Mhm.
I feel like this trap is the most common thing that I see too, by
Mm,
the way. And that it's such a protection, first of all,
Yes.
of not getting hurt.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I have dating quizzes too, and one of my archetype is called the list lady. And the list lady,
mhm.
yeah, she has like the Bugs Bunny roll that goes out so long of the list that,
Yep.
that no one, and if there's one thing on the list, one thing that she like, it like red flags her, she's out of there,
Yep.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
really that what people are doing are they're trying to protect themselves,
Hmm.
in this list because that reminded them of their ex or a
Hmm.
bad
Yes.
experiment or experience that they had. Conversely, on the other side, then if people fear rejection, no one's going to be good enough because then they
Hmm.
can't reject me.
Yep.
Yes.
Right. So it's all fear based, like every one of these traps, which is a good thing to just, I think, extract, knowing that people can overcome these things.
Yeah.
But you first have to be aware of what's happening, in order. So that's why I love these, just the way that you're framing it. It's awesome. Okay. So that's the second one. What's the third?
The next one is validation trap, which I think you actually
Ah,
got to earlier
Yes.
that like
Mhm.
dating, it's meant to be a fun exercise to meet new people and enjoy ourselves and to find, that person that we want to end up being with. Although now dating takes on so much more. It's a measure of our self-worth. It's a measure if we're good enough. There's so much pressure coming from society and ourselves and comparison among others. There's just so much
oh,
weight attached to it that a lot of times it ends up being validation. We're just trying to like rack up the number of matches or go on enough dates and even like prove ourselves. Like we have to always like wonder like is it the ego driving or is it actually like someone that should be with because they're a good partner to you? Like I can
oh
remember
yeah.
an instance for me that I was like had this situation where a friend of mine like told me his feelings towards me, and it was someone that I had never like looked at that way or anything to that sort. And I was like, "Oh, could I date this person? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like he's like the right person, like maturity wise and all that." But then eventually I decided to give it a chance, and at that point, he was like, "Actually, I don't wanna be in a relationship," and, like, pulled it away.
Mm.
And in this earlier version of myself, it made me double down and be like, "I need to,
Mhm.
like, validate myself." And I spent 2.5 years in this situationship
Ah,
that, should have been, like, left at that moment, right? It was someone I
mhm.
didn't even like in the first place. And we see this happen all the time. There's, like, the sunk cost fallacy too of, like, I've
Yes.
invested X amount of time
Yeah.
and, by admitting defeat, then that shows that I'm not worthy and lovable, and that is so far from true.
Mhm.
That is so true. Thank you for sharing that personal story on that too. And do you ladies say, and maybe this is again just research, because I'm seeing this show up, is that social media is a big culprit of it
Oh,
too, because
absolutely.
everyone's comparing themselves to other.
Absolutely.
And of course, you're not posting things like when you look like crap or when you're lonely. Like it's only like couples and happy
Mhm.
people and beautiful people, and so I think it adds to that culture because if you already have low self esteem and low self worth, then you look for that outside validation and then you're constantly comparing yourself. It's like really the growth does come from that internal validation. I mean, it sounds so woo woo and psychological, but it's so true. I don't know what, you know, both you ladies think about that too.
I mean, it absolutely, and all the traps that we talk about,
Yeah.
it really bubbles up to the biggest contradiction in dating, which is people date to be in relationships, or most people still date to be in relationships. Yet everything we do is to prevent a relationship from happening. And the reason
Mm.
for this is because relationships expose who you are. Relationships are by nature vulnerable. So when we get close to what could look like a relationship, we fall for these traps. We self sabotage. We have all these avoidant behaviors where it prevents us from being in a relationship. I mean, if you think about it, everything like the settling paradox is because you are so fearful of exposing yourself in a real relationship that you settle for less than what you deserve. Right?
Mm.
So it's a really interesting thing. So with the validation trap, it's still preventing us, but the ultimate trap that prevents us from being in a relationship is a relationship chicken, is what we call it,
Is that
where
the fourth one, right?
it's a fourth
Yes.
one where you do everything uh, in dating that you would never do in a relationship that actually prevents you from being in a relationship. Like being performative and waiting for that text back or holding out like holding out communication to make someone chase you. All these games are not conducive to being in a relationship or a partnership, yet we do them because we think that's what gets someone. That's what gets them into our orbit, and it gets really dangerous that way. So Julie and I have both examined our behaviors back in the day dating, and just like
Mm.
we were just like, what the hell were we thinking? Like, why would you do that in dating if you're trying to get someone to like you? I remember waiting for someone to text me back, and they've texted me like 24 hours later, and me thinking, I will wait 48 hours to text them back just to show him. Like, who would do that to their partner? Like, oh, they texted me back a day later. I'm going to wait a week. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Julie, what do you think?
I mean, I think just so much of this stems deep though. Like, I don't want people to walk away and be like, I'm doing it wrong. I think it's our culture. It's the dating culture. And like some of this has been around for ages, right? Like this like games
Mhm.
mentality. And I think like sometimes we think that we're above it now and that's outdated. And I think a lot of it still runs deep subconsciously. Like one of the, most common questions we always get is around texting of like, when should I
Yes.
text them back? How should I
Yeah.
text them back? It's so calculated and like looking at every other part of life, like it's not this orchestrated. And I think a big piece of it too is dating is so public now. That's a big shift. We used to date like
Oh,
more
that's true.
privately, like
Yeah.
now we're talking about dating all the time. We're swiping in front of our friends. So that's where, validation trap comes out, like of
Mhm.
course we want to look like we're on par. And, if someone says they don't want to be with us, we take it really personally. But with relationship chicken too, you know, like we don't want to show like it's like the game of chicken. Like you don't want to show your cards and be the last one standing. It's like a self
Yes.
preservation, right?
That is so true. I never thought about that. You're right. Dating is so much more public than it was back in the day when there was like Betsy across the street and John next door, and just people got to know each other, and it was just more organic and
Even
natural.
Match, like
Yeah.
those sites, like you would go home
Yeah.
to your like, like your desktop computer and log in. You wouldn't be like swiping in front of your friends in like a bar.
I want to say something about the relationship chicken, and because I think this one is causing a lot of confusion in what I
Yeah.
see out there.
Mm,
And this actually has to do with the modern world and the shift in masculinity and
Yes.
femininity. So there's like a couple layers to that one, right? And I also want to highlight the fact that, you know, I'm not a cookie cutter approach coach. One size does not fit all, in my opinion. We all have our own journey that shapes us. And then, like, later, there's different rules that may apply to different people because people come to me all the time. Well, how many texts should
Right.
I wait until I text back? Like, to your point, like
yeah.
it becomes kind of the game. And my answer is never black and white. It's never, well,
Mm.
three texts and then, or three dates and then sex, or, like
Yep.
whatever it is. It doesn't matter to me. It matters about your journey. So, for instance, if someone has more masculine energy and maybe they were the maverick, like you
Mhm.
said, or maybe they were attracting, certain people in their life. Let's say a woman has, because I deal with a lot of high achievers women, and they, you have to have masculine energy in the workforce. You just have to. But if it wasn't serving them and who they're attracting, from their mouth, right? Like they want something different. Then it's looking at how can they be different with men
Mm,
in the beginning to create new habits. So for instance, in a relationship chicken, like you could have different kinds of chickens, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, and it's just a matter of your journey with it all, because if it means like texting and saying thank you after a date, to be more soft and feminine, then great, do it. If it means waiting for the guy to text you first because you're the like desperate, anxious dater that's constantly, so that was really fun. Can we do it again? Like maybe you need to hold back, So it's interesting, I think, too, how the pitfalls can also be almost individualized. I don't know what you all think about that too. Just
I mean,
mm.
absolutely. I think
yeah,
people need to know themselves. And, I think our message in this book is that you are in control, that
I love
even
it.
though these traps exist, we actually believe this is the best time to date and to find relationships that are
Woo-wee.
fulfilling. And, I think there's never been a time where people have like as much equality between partners and, emotional vulnerability as we do in today's world if we
Yes.
can harvest it in the right ways. So we actually are, very pro. Like people always expect us to be like, dating's the worst. It's terrible. That is not our message. But our message is that modern dating culture is getting in the way for a lot of people. So how do you get out of the way and rise above the antics of it? I think also in relationship chicken too. I mean, one of the challenges is like changing gender roles that no one knows. There's no norms anymore, right? Like
Yeah,
Right.
people are
totally.
waiting
Right.
for, in hetero relationships for men to make the move. And then men are like a little gun shy with all the stuff that's happened in Me Too and the world and all of that. And it's just kind of a free for all where nothing's happening. So
Mm,
I think what you were saying, Kimmy, of like, where is this coming from? Like, are you making the move because you feel anxious? That's what you
yes.
have to address, not necessarily the making the move. So I think understanding yourself and what's getting in your way, that's why have the quiz can look at have that personalized view is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like the title of your book. It's like you're putting the power into the person, like
Yes.
how to be dateable. Like it's you, it's not them,
Yep.
it's you. And when you love you and you work on you and you change things about you, that's when you get a different result. And that's what's so important. So ladies, thank you so much for I could go on and on with you. I guess my last question is kind of that, like Julie, what you were saying, because I do want to give people hope. I have the same
Mhm.
message. I mean, the name of my workshop series is called Stop Hating Dating. Like if you go
Yeah.
to like it's
Good.
stophatingdating.com, and literally you'll see all my workshops, because
Good.
I want people to know that dating can be fun, and it is fun,
Yep.
but you just gotta like learn the skills and know yourself, like we were highlighting. What are some maybe just gold nuggets that you would share, and last like parting words of wisdom, just to give people hope about how to be a better dater?
Well, this is why we love you, Kimmy, because you do make dating look very fun. Like I'm not dating right now, but I want to date because you make it look really fun.
Oh, thank you.
I what has really grounded me in being a better dater slash partner now is not being tied to a result or an outcome. I used to do things like my actions and behaviors were tied to, oh, to not scare someone away or to win someone over or to show them that, I'm hard to get. None of that was grounded to me. But now if I put myself at the forefront, my question is, how do I truly feel in this moment and how do I communicate that? So in
Mm.
your example, Kimmy, of like, you having good time with someone, what do you do after the date? Back in the day, I would have been like, don't tell them I had a good time. Like, I want them to wonder, because the result I was tied to was tricking someone into thinking I was higher value. But now I would ask, how do I feel? Oh, I had a really good time. And I want to show them my appreciation. I guess in my mind, it's not even about being more feminine or masculine. It's just authentically who I am is I want to show my appreciation. So I would send a text and say, I had a really great time. Thank you. So I think it makes it so much simpler if you just ground it back to what do I feel in this moment and how
Mhm.
do I communicate it with that person?
Beautiful. Love, love, love that so much. And just make sure that you put a little cute emoji at the end of that text. I'm just saying. You have to make it flirty.
Gotta make
Don't
it
be too
fun.
serious.
I
How
mean,
about you, Julie?
I agree with all of that. I think the biggest change for me was putting myself at the forefront. But I think one of the things that gives me hope for all the daters out there, and I think what the benefit that we're like so many people are so focused on dating, it means that we're all ultimately looking for the same thing. We want
Yep.
that connection. And we've been able to see I was looking at this photo the other day of like this group of people from like a community that we had over the pandemic. And all of them at this point are in like happy, healthy
Yeah.
relationships.
Yay.
And even like Yue and I, like we were so lost and confused in dating. So I guess like the hope I would leave is like nothing is forever, nothing is permanent.
Yeah.
And, things
Yes.
can change really quickly all of a sudden. Like you never know who's next around the corner. And that's one of the beauties of dating. And, I think like it really just takes getting out. Like, this is the message we keep hammering is like, how do you rise above the way things are? Like, we always hear people say, like, well, that's how dating is supposed to work, or that's how dating
Mm.
works.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And we're like, throw that out. Like, how do
Yeah.
you want it to work? And that's the shift that is really like the second whole part of our book of like, okay, now that we know these traps, what are we going to do about them? Because we really feel confident from watching all the daters in our network that like we absolutely can get out of this, which is why our cover is a maze. It's getting out. We
Yeah.
made our way out.
Oh, is that why? I was wondering about that. That's so awesome. Both of your messages is rooted in almost a similar kind of theme, and that is about staying present, not
Yes.
Mhm.
being driven by an outcome. And there are no guarantees of what tomorrow will bring. And the more
Nope.
that we can just connect and really open ourselves up and let go of some of the fear and the mistrust
Mhm.
that's out there, that's when we really will find that true love. So,
For
oh,
sure.
ladies, thank you so, so much for coming on. I'm sure I'll have you back at some point. Just let everyone know where they can find your book.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, any
Amazon,
bookseller
baby.
out there, but also
Yeah.
local bookstores. You go to howtobedateable.com and
Okay,
order
great.
through there as well.
And take the quiz, Kimmy, take the quiz. So curious to see what you we didn't have
I'm
time to
definitely
go
taking that
through
quiz.
we didn't have time to go through all the archetypes. There are 5 of them, but it's really fun exercise.
Yeah.
Take it with your friends and share your results.
Love it. Love
I'm
it.
very curious.
Well, I'll take the quiz and then I'll have you back and we'll talk about that. And
Yeah,
I'll
there
be
we
on the
go.
couch.
Yeah, yeah. We'll therapize you. I don't know if that's a
Therapize
word.
me. I am so good with that. Thanks, ladies. And thank you joining me today, listening. This has been the Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, of course, Kimmy Seltzer. And remember, you can build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. As always, make sure you go to my site, kimmyseltzer.com. And if you're finding yourself having a little bit of a hard time navigating the modern dating world and falling into some of these traps that we've been talking about, then click the link you see here in the show description for a free private. It is a private call with me. And by the way, it is me. I've had a couple of people say, "Oh my God, it's you." It's like, no, that is me. It's not a bot. It's not my mini coach or whatever. But I really do want to map out ways that I can possibly help you, and definitely, definitely get that book Dateable. I can't wait to take their quiz as well. And remember, working on you is working on your dating life. That's all for now.